But I assume you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
I, I was going back to, in my mind, your kind of opening statement about Gen Z and that reference, and we didn't really delve into it because you would think out of all generations, my generation would be the one that would be more willing to just say, fuck it, let's fight. And I'm not there. You would kind of think that I've been torn down and broken down enough over time to be at that point by now, and I still hold out hope for some level of societal change without violence. And it makes me wonder if that's not an ingrained generational thing.
I do. I was gonna say before we talk about that, how would you feel if Biden pardoned this kid?
How would I feel
Yeah,
if
what's
the
your
actual events of what happened over the past week have happened?
yeah?
Um, I really don't have a hate on the decision like a lot of people do. Like this is one of those odd ones for me because I dislike the broadness of what a president can do with regard to issuing a pardon, but it's a facet of a system that's fundamentally fucked up. And I recognize as a follower of information related to that system how not doing this is also fucked up. You know what I mean? Or maybe
I
not.
think so.
Like the my issue is I recognize the criminal justice system for the mess that it is, and recognize that as a uh, as a as someone in a position to be able to issue a pardon, like trying to kind of separate the whole. Let's remove even the father son dynamic for a moment. Just someone who is able to issue a pardon, looking at the way charges have been levied against this particular individual and the equivalent charges and how they are levied against other individuals and the statistical distribution of similar charges across the general population. Like just looking at this is a guy who is very much on the extreme punitive side of receiving uh, actions for the charges levied. Like there's no way to debate that. There is very much a if you were to take a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the most lenient, 10 being the most punitive, for these particular charges, where does this person fall on the scale of all people with these charges? You are much closer to 10 than you are to 1. Um, I have no problems with a pardon. If you add in the father son dynamic, I think it makes even more sense. Where I have issues isn't with the ability to issue the pardon and thus issuing the pardon, it's how uncontained presidential pardons are in and of themselves. Like the scope can be whatever the scope is determined to be by the person issuing it. It's not constrained in any way, shape, fashion, or form. That is what I have an issue with, as opposed to the issuance of the pardon itself. I hope that makes sense.
Uh, I think that it does, and you've said sort of what uh, I would agree with you. Like there's nothing in there that you said that I don't disagree with, and you said things that I was like, yes, yes, I agree with those things as well that I hadn't thought. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh man, this looks bad. And then when I you know read a little more about it, I was like, I get it. I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of criticism of it. Um,
And I do think there's a separate argument there about how it looks as opposed to everything else, because it looks really bad when you harp on you're not going to do it and then you decide to do it anyway. Same thing with anything else with regard to human behavior. If I say I'm not going to do this thing, and I say it multiple times, and then I go and do this thing, that looks bad. It just inevitably, no matter what, it is going to look bad. Doesn't matter that I might have changed my position or opinion because of other things over the course of that time. Doesn't matter that potentially new information influenced my decision. None of that matters. What matters is that I explicitly said I wasn't going to do something, and then I did it. And that's the problem in this particular scenario as well, where President Biden specifically stated he was not going to pardon his son more than once and did anyway. And it's not that he did it anyway. It's not anything about that final step at all. It's the fact that instead of being political, for lack of better wording, when answering that initial question, he took a very staunch stance and said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I mean, you have to admire the ideological belief that you could be in a position where you could say you're not going to do it. But it's career, or career is not the right word. It's behaviorally, optically bad, because you put yourself in a position where if you have other information that actually does influence your decision, doesn't matter what that information is, doesn't matter how just it is, how fact-based it is, nothing about anything else matters. If you have explicitly stated, I'm not going to do something, and then you decide to do it, nothing changes how that makes it optically horrific for you. Full stop. And it's unfortunate that we can't recognize that nuance in general, but that's the problem in this particular case. It's not actually a problem with the pardon. It's not a problem with the details or anything else. It's the explicit step or statement, and then the reversal on the explicit statement.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, but the thought I had about it was, it's like, there's no good answer for the question. If the answer is yes, then it's like, oh, okay. Or if the answer is no, like he said, then it's like, then when he turns around and then does it, it's like, oh, that looks bad. But if the answer is no comment, then it's like, well, that also looks bad too.
So, I mean, I agree. And this is an unfortunate byproduct of our system in general, I think, more so than anything else. But I also think you can answer it in a way that makes it less problematic. You can say, I have no intention of interfering, but I don't know the full details of what's going to transpire. I can't answer your question as a result.
I mean, that's similar to no comment.
It is, but it gives the general explanation that people are missing in a way. I mean, I guess let's back up that statement slightly. You're always going to have a contingent of people who are going to say it's problematic, worst decision, just attack you for it. You're always going to have that contingent of people also who say, well, of course you decided to do so. It makes sense. The group that you are trying to target is that in between, who you just want to be able to say, I want to trust the system. I want to believe in it. I just don't know what all the details are. And I want to refrain from making a decision until I know the details. And that's what you're appealing to. You're appealing to logic, not the extremes. And I'm sure there are even better ways to do so, but having to lock yourself into an extreme is what you want to avoid. It's better to look weak or problematic on the front end and then have people try to make rationalizations for you because of the information and decisions on the back end than it is to look strong on the front end and then look weak on the back end because people don't want to look for rationalizations or anything else for you. They just look at what you said versus what you did. And there's your Politics 101 TED Talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
But you know, I mean, the interesting thing about it is that you have to pander to human behavior, and that's not what people typically do. They try to pander to either thought processes or supporters in their specific mindset, and that just doesn't work in that type of scenario.
Yeah, you know, I was gonna say, if Biden pardoned the shooter of the United Healthcare CEO, I'd probably spend less time thinking about that. I mean, like, was this a good idea or not? I'd think about that less. It would take me less, or rather, it would take me less time to come to the conclusion. It's like, I'm okay with this.
I find that interesting.
Right?
Well, specifically because I would actually grapple with that more than I grapple with him pardoning a son. Not that I would come to a decision slowly. Like, I expect it would be a pretty quick, yeah, I'm okay with it. But like him pardoning a son, to me, is almost a no-brainer. Whereas him, if he were to pardon this particular guy, I would actually think about it for a moment before I come to the conclusion that, yeah, that's fine.
I guess it's because I don't really care about his son, and I have a more vested interest in this guy, not because I like him more or whatever, but it's just.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I'm pointing to is why I find it fascinating, because I have no interest either way in either one, right? Like, that's overly strong. I have no vested interest in any outcomes for either one. I'll put it that way. And you don't either, other than the fact that both of us do have a vested interest in any changes that might come to healthcare as a result of this. But that's different from this particular case. Like the changes to healthcare are a lofty, ambitional, hopeful goal as a result of these actions, which unfortunately probably still won't happen.
No, I don't expect any changes.
But I think that's the difference to key in on, is that there's at least a link to potential ramifications that make it a vested interest in that case, as opposed to the Hunter Biden case. Because there's no even leap of a reference to a link to anything in the Hunter Biden case that is of interest for me personally.
I guess the thing for me is, like, I guess the vested interest I have is just like, I don't expect any healthcare changes to occur from this. The only changes I expect are increased security, more money spent on security for people in this position, and expect more of the same, because I don't think I think it's going to increase. I think people, this kid's going to be, people are going to look at him and they're like, somebody's probably going to do it again. And they're going to do it again until something changes. I've made the comment more than once that, the change is inevitable because the current regime is going to die. This guy was just kind of speeding things up.
Feel like I have a statement there, but I'm not grasping it. So I didn't want to continue to pause because I don't want to convey that I had nothing to follow it up with. But I can't figure out what is nagging at my mind with that statement.
Well, that being the case, I wasn't say that being the case, then I think I want to segue into. Just I've recently been having conversations with some folks about the concept of the 80-year turnings that we've seen in American history and where we currently are, and just some additional conversations I've had. And with my wife and some of her friends, because a few weeks ago we went to the farmers market, and we were talking about the idea of history repeating itself came up, and then I was like, oh yeah, and I was like, there's a whole thing you can look at American history and see, like, these 80-year periods that can be broken down into smaller 20-year segments, where it's repeated, we're in the third one, and I talked about turnings and so forth, and gave a little more detail, and they were really interested, and actually interested enough that I said I talked about it with on a podcast with my friend, and so they wanted the podcast, so I sent them that link, so we had they listen. I know one of them listened to it, and I also sent them copies of the diagram, or the are the diagrams? Yeah, the diagrams that we made with your diagram, my diagram, and so forth. And it was kind of cool to have, to share that. And then I just, one of the things that I hadn't really thought about was that if you consider the baby boomer generation, everything's going to shit for them. Like, they were born in the high time. They saw the awakening. They lived through the awakening. They lived through the unraveling, and they're living through the crisis. And they're gonna, a lot of them may die in the crisis. And so, from their perspective, it's like, yes, everything has gotten worse. Now, why did everything get worse? Well, we have some podcasts about that. And whereas, you and I were born I don't know. Were you born at the tail end of the awakening and into the unravel? Like, I'm only 2 years younger than you. But it was just like, basically at the point where I can start recognizing things, like, we're well into the unraveling, and now living through a crisis. So at this point, yeah, things. I never saw the high. Neither of us ever saw a high time, and we're like, things are getting worse. We're in the same place as the boomers, and like, things are getting worse, and we know why they're getting worse, and we're like, I'm ready for things to get better, and like, maybe I'll get to spend the end of my life as things get better. And a kid like I started this conversation. These Gen Z kids, I was like, yeah, they're living through. Basically, they're seeing all they've had is the crisis. They've had nothing else. So yeah, So for me, it wasn't surprising that this kid was so young.
I don't think I was surprised by his age. I think the one thing that I kind of keep coming back to is I'm just surprised that it took this long. And I don't know why. If we try to think about it from the perspective of what different groups have known, and thinking about there being a group of individuals who saw a more positive time and kind of watched everything decline, and other groups who have only seen the decline and are ready for change. You could certainly make some arguments from that perspective that it makes sense that this guy, who has only known the lowest points, might have jumped to action as a result quicker than maybe certain others. But I think that's, to an extent, oversimplifying like how the different trajectories of generations typically go, to try to explain an instance of an issue instead of looking at kind of the overall trajectory of where things are going and how this particular instance fits into that trajectory. And I really don't know if I'm making sense with my thought. Like, in my mind, I am seeing the arrows and connecting the dots. So I'm going to try to explain it well enough to convey it. But the thought that I kind of came back to is that we have plenty of people who are fed up with the state of things in general. We've mentioned multiple times, or at least I've mentioned multiple times, that I don't see certain aspects of the trajectories we're on changing without some level of violent intervention. And we go back and we add this layer of just generational proclivity, maybe for lack of better phrasing, toward how it views this transitionary period, and kind of wrap that up with my statement about being surprised that it took this long, and try to make sense of that combination of things that seem very skewed and disparate in and of themselves. But when you think about it from the perspective of these large groups of individuals trying to navigate changes and influences to their day-to-day world, environment, etc., and think about what each group has seen or understood and how they compare and how they apply those comparisons to the next thing that they see or understand, or the next major event, or whatever. And you start to kind of get to a point and paint a picture where it's not really surprising that it's this young kid making the particular set of decisions he made. And it's not as surprising that you have this large group of individuals really pushing for a return to what they consider a better time in the political sphere, et cetera, et cetera. Like what it kind of boiling down and getting to is that if you take all of these semi-disparate thoughts and explanations and things that I'm sure I'm not doing a good job explaining from my thought process perspective, but you really look at it independent of personal perspective, then you start to see the same pattern that we have talked about and identified with these turnings previously playing out in influencing decisions in a way that makes a hell of a lot of sense if you didn't think about them with regard to these turnings. I really hope that last part wrapped it up enough to make sense, because I followed exactly what I wanted to try to say from a diagram perspective in my mind, but I feel like I still didn't convey what I really wanted to say.
I think I follow.
I think maybe another way to put it is if you consider the turnings, the events that we have seen transpire make sense.
Yes.
Damn, that was so much simpler. But I felt like I
all
needed
the
to
other things
explain.
to get it out. Yeah.
Yes, right. And
it's speaking. It's a process.
Yes, but in looking at the trajectory of so many other things and so many other things that we've talked about in different ways on the show, past, present, and I'm sure future, once you take all of those different things and layer on the groups of people who are influencing the narrative for those different things from this subdivision of the groups of generations in the different cycles within turnings, things start to make more sense.
Yes. And that was the whole. I think that was sort of the. I don't know that I had that specific thought, but that's what I was floating around. That's what I was. That was the area I was in.
What makes it a little bit of inside baseball real quick. What makes it hilarious is that I could see in my mind imagery that conveyed this particular thing. And what I was trying to do was translate that imagery for how I understood this particular issue into a narrative that would help explain the issue. It's fascinating how our brains work sometimes. I have no clue what to try to follow with.
Well, when you were talking, I actually sent you a few minutes before, I sent you a picture. I came across.
I saw that.
I hadn't seen it before.
Well, I saw it when you sent it, is what I mean.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, to share with our, I guess, so that you're not having to do too much editing work. It's a picture of the assassin, and overlaying on a popular meme. It's the guy with his girlfriend looking back at something else, and the girlfriend or significant other looking at him in the guy is looking away from his significant other, and is like seeing something interesting to him, and the significant other is looking at the guy like, you better not be looking at him. So the guy is looking at the assassin, the girl is looking at him, and man, I'm making this bad, but the overlay or the text there is that the guy is the Americans, and the significant other is voting. Do you do chapter art? Maybe you can make it chapter art.
Yeah, I can edit it in as chapter art.
It can be in show notes, yeah.
I can do that too.
Yeah. I like this thing. JFK tried to warn us. That's the caption above. JFK. It's from thegodpodcast.com, but it says, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible," and that's the caption over it. But I think the full quote is, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.
For too long, my country, the wealthiest nation in a continent which is not wealthy, failed to carry out its full responsibilities to its sister republics. We have now accepted that responsibility. In the same way, those who possess wealth and power in poor nations must accept their own responsibilities. They must lead the fight for those basic reforms which alone can preserve the fabric of their societies. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable.